Okay, we'll go ahead and call to order the regular meeting of the Lions Board of Trustees for Tuesday, February 18th, 2020. Will the clerk please call the roll?
1 second.
Sorry,
Where do you want to go? There we go.
I just assumed you were waiting for me.
Mayor Sullivan?
Present.
Trustee Browning? Trustee Miller?
Present.
Trustee Caravas?
Present.
Trustee Drystat?
Present.
Trustee Farrell?
Present.
Trustee Roberts?
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll take a brief reflective moment of silence, please. Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to amend tonight's agenda?
Yes, I move to approve tonight's agenda with the following change, and that change is to modify the order of general business so that item 10.1 becomes item 10.2 and item 10.2 becomes 10.1. Reverses the order.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? I'll call for the vote. And the motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Don't think we'll have a sheriff's report tonight. He's out sick, unfortunately.
He is. However, he did mention that there has been nothing of, significance occurring other than, assisting with traffic and roads and the bike race recently. So, or the lack of a bike race recently. So, he said all is well.
Okay, great. So we can go ahead, and we don't have anything under boards and commissions tonight, so we'll go on to staff reports.
Okay, the first report will be Finance Director Jill Johnson presenting the monthly report for, what are we on? January. January of 2020, and then overview, well, year-to-date's going to be very, very similar.
Actually, I was not prepared to do year-to-date tonight.
Well,
so-
we're just kind of laughing about it because it's January.
Oh, okay.
You're technically doing it, so.
That's true. That's true. Okay, so, good evening. Let's start. So first of all, I had a request to just review with the board what happened to the set-aside money for the clawback. So just kind of a brief timeline. The board started to set aside $200,000 each year from the general fund budget 4 years ago. Oh, can you not hear? Sorry. So whenever you put a cost into the grants fund, which is where we're accumulating all of our costs for FEMA reimbursement related to the flood expenditures, whenever you put a cost in that grants fund, you have to have some kind of revenue to offset it. So if you don't have a grant that can offset that cost, then the town will cover that expense. So in 2018, we had the accumulated balance of $800,000 that we transferred from the general fund to the grants fund to cover approximately $1 million of identified ineligible, eligible later costs. And since that transfer, the flood recovery team has been able to get some of those ineligible costs covered. So that's kind of relieved some of that $800,000 that we've already transferred. So each year, we're going to have to look at that eligible, ineligible list and make sure that those costs that are on that list are truly still ineligible or eligible later. If we can get other funding, then we don't need to use that $800,000. We don't anticipate pushing that back into the general fund. That $800,000 will stay there and just absorb the costs that are on that list. In 2019, the town set aside $200,000 of fund balance. We actually restricted it in the general fund, and in 2020 we added an additional $100,000 from the general fund and $100,000 from the Parks and Recreation Fund. At this time, I do not anticipate that we will be moving those in 2019 into the grants fund. I'm anticipating that we will keep it in the general fund for future ineligible costs. So it's just kind of a really high-level overview of where that money is and how we're going to be using it. Do you guys have any questions about that?
Trustee Browning?
I understand that the, the list of ineligible and potentially eligible later costs is fluid. It changes as items come and go. Is there a list of items that have been determined to be ineligible, that we've exhausted all potential sources to recover them from other funds? I mean, like, we know that out of that 800,000, this much, we've run out of choice of options to try to find that money. The things I'm thinking about, like, I know we thought we were going to have to eat about 20,000 on redoing the fish structure in the park, and then there was a roughly 80,000, I think, for the St. Vrain Trail. Although maybe there's another source for that. I was just wondering if we have kind of an up-to-date list of things that we just don't think we're going to be able to recover.
So it's interesting that you asked that, because there is a list of things that we do not believe that we will ever get reimbursed for. However, those are some of the costs that the flood team has gotten other funding for from somewhere else. So
Okay.
yes, there's a list. Is it truly, truly not eligible? We're still trying to get funding wherever we can.
Okay. So we really don't, there really isn't a number that we can say out of that 800,000. We know, we're pretty sure that 300,000 we're going to have to apply that against. We can't
Not
really
at
do
this
that
time.
yet. Okay.
We're still too early in the process.
Okay. Thank you.
Were there any other questions on the clawback set aside, where that money is and how we're using it? Okay. Let's jump into the budget. So you will notice that we changed our budget methodology. Our accounting system has the capability to do a monthly budget. The board had requested this, and we were able to accommodate it. So by doing a monthly budget, it allows us to actually look at our revenues and expenses on a seasonally adjusted amount. So in the past, what we've done is we've taken our annual budget and just divided it by 12 and then put 1/12 into each month. So now what we're going to do, though, is we're going to produce a monthly budget. And some of the challenges to producing a monthly budget was, how do we determine how much of the budget goes into each month? So we developed a tool, and what the tool does is it looks at the past 3 years of data by month, calculates a percentage of the income or expense which was received or used in that month, and then that percentage is applied to the board-approved budget to get our monthly amount. So I know there's a lot of numbers on this chart.
Mayor
sorry?
Pro Tem had a question.
I just wanted to confirm that that takes care of both seasonality, meaning literal seasonality, and the one-time expense situations.
It does. So when you have a one-time expense like our debt service, it actually goes into the month that that payment is going to hit instead of having it allocated across all the months. Okay, so this is just an example of the methodology that we use. This is the tool, and I know there's a lot of numbers and they're very, very small, and I'm sorry about that. But basically, we just took 3 years worth of data for each month. We took an average, divided that by the total to get our percentage for the month, and then took that monthly percentage and multiplied that by our budget. So this gave us a monthly budget. This one in particular is our residential electric sales account. Is our revenue account. The chart on there is just kind of a quick glance to make sure that there wasn't something weird in the data. So this would be our actual revenue, how it's allocated throughout the month. And this is just an example. So when we look at our numbers for this month, you're going to see that our tax revenues are 0. And there's always this question, why is our tax revenue 0? It's because the amounts that we receive in January are for December tax revenues. So our December revenues we receive in January are actually booked back into the prior year. So that's why you're not seeing any tax revenues in our financials today. They're actually booked back into 2019. We have some expenditures that do that as well. Okay, let's jump into the numbers. So the unaudited revenues for the month of January were $370,511. We had a majority of that, 36%, going into the electric fund, followed by the sanitation fund at 18%. For our expenditures, we had $385,920, with the majority coming out of the water fund, 45%, followed by the general fund at 29%. When we look at revenue and expenses for the year, for the month, for January, our expenditures exceeded revenues in the general fund, the water fund, and the Parks and Recreation Fund, although on the Parks and Recreation Fund, it's only by $1, so I don't know if you can really count that. Our 2019 revenues that we received in January for the general fund were $104,000 that we actually booked back into the prior year. These included specific ownership tax, sales tax, use tax, franchise tax, cigarette tax, highway users tax, county road and bridge, and lodging tax. Additionally, we had 2019 revenues that were received in January for the Parks and Recreation Fund that we moved back into 2019 of $34,000. The high expenditures in the water fund are related to debt service that was required in January. And we didn't do a year-to-date chart, which is usually my next chart because January is year-to-date. So when we look at our revenues compared to budget, this is our seasonally adjusted budget. So we can see that the revenues for January are lower than the 3-year average for the same time of year for all funds except for the Parks and Recreation Fund. In both the electric fund and the water fund, the metered sales were both lower than average. Also, there weren't any investment or tap fees in January where there had been in the past 3 years. The sanitation fund metered sales were higher than average. However, the lack of the tap fees in January kept these revenue numbers below the 3-year average. Interest income for the sanitation fund is being reported in the water fund in preparation for combining those two funds. The budgets for the interest income will be combined at that time. Increases in both water rates and sanitation rates were effective for January, so the expectation was that the sales would exceed the 3-year average for both of those funds, where it only did it in the sanitation fund. Stormwater revenues are right on target. And the revenues in the Parks and Recreation Fund are high in January because the camping revenues, which we received in 2019 for stays at the park, are actually not considered revenue until 2020. We moved $19,875 in prepaid camping revenue into 2020 in January. In addition to the prepaid camping revenue, the additional camping revenues of $25,625 received in January exceeded the 3-year average by $8,000. So that's pretty cool. All parks revenues, except for the shower revenue, exceeded the 3-year average for January. So for expenditures, we can see that the expenditures for January are lower than the 3-year average for the same time of year for all funds except for the Parks and Recreation Fund. Just something of general note, salaries and benefits for all funds were higher than the average because 2020 had 3 pay periods in January, where in prior years we only had 2. The general fund is missing the sheriff's monthly billing of approximately $23,000 and the RTD billing for the EcoPass program for $24,000, which are typically paid in January. The electric fund is missing the mean January billing of approximately, it's about $80,000. Additionally, the meters, which are currently out to bid, are allocated each month because I didn't know which month to put those in, so your budget's probably a little bit higher than normal. There is debt service in the water fund in January, and you can see where we've got the budget kind of popped up there to accommodate that. In the water fund, we have not received the Longmont Water Service billing yet, which accounts for about $18,000 worth of expense. Both the treatment and transmission departments in the sanitation fund were light on expenses, and many of those expenses were actually booked back into the prior year. The budget for expenses in the stormwater fund are lower because the 3-year average, there was only 1 month with expense, so January of 2019. January of 2018 was before the fund was actually created. And the budget overage for parks is related to salaries. I was a little nervous about the monthly budget, but I really like it. It really shows how things are going. So when we look at by quarter, the first month of the first quarter for the general fund, you're seeing, again, those revenues being booked back, so we're seeing less revenue than expense. For the electric fund, the revenues are exceeding expense. For the water fund, debt service is going to push our expenses higher than revenue. Sanitation fund is showing much more revenue than expense. And our stormwater fund, revenues are exceeding expense. And for our parks and recreation fund, we're off by $1. That's so funny how that got so close. So this is really the chart of the night. So we normally don't see our December sales tax until February, and since I got the numbers before this meeting, I went ahead and included them. So this is the picture for the whole year. So we are seeing, due to the destination sourcing for sales tax collection starting in July, that our sales taxes have really increased. Now, if we look at the chart that makes up that graphic, we can see that the February receipts that is a real number. The original budget for sales tax in 2019 was $1,160,000, split between the general fund and the parks fund. The final sales tax collected is $1,318,764, which is 12.8% higher than 2018 and 13.7% over budget. When developing the 2020 budget, the state had recommended a 5% increase. However, 5% over the 2019 budget is still $100,000 under what we collected this year. So this looks really super awesome. Economic conditions, of course, could impact our sales tax for this year. We've got world health issues as well as some domestic politics, which could change how much sales tax we would collect this year. However, even with those potential impacts, a moderate adjustment to the 2020 budget could certainly be entertained. And that would be something that the board could think about. And that's all I've got for tonight. Do you have any questions?
Any questions? Do you have the breakdown for the contribution of the, you call it destination tax
Destination
amount?
sourcing?
Yeah, how much of it, the sales tax was that versus, so almost allow us to look at it year over year to see, did the local contribution change compared to prior year?
I'm trying to figure out how I
Excuse me.
would get to that number. So in our sales tax data, it would show us out of state, but it's not just out of state sales tax which is making this change. It's the change from, if I'm in Denver and we're here and I'm shipping something here, in the past we didn't have to collect sales tax for here. Now that's changed to this being where the item is coming, then the vendor has to collect the sales tax and remit it. So I think that that's where the big change has been. I haven't really seen a lot of change in out-of-state type of sales tax remittance. I believe it's more the in-state, but I don't know how to get to that data.
Okay.
Let me think about how to get
It
that.
would be interesting just to keep track of what's happening locally versus globally, if that's possible.
Chart, the difference between where we have been tracking.
The graphic?
Yeah. If the destination started in July, we would have collected that for September. So that was the high point. You can kind of see, a basic difference on where the gold line has been tracking compared to the gray line overall. And it's fairly 10 to 20,000 maybe a month.
But to know if that's all because of the destination sourcing, I don't know that I could
Yeah.
really,
Without distilling.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we can do.
Yeah, if it's possible, I think that would still be really good information for the board to have is just what's the, percentage local market versus remote.
Lions versus, and the excess would be the difference.
Let's talk and see if we can't figure
Okay.
out something to present to the board.
Okay.
We'll see if we can't dig into the data and get that for you.
Well, because I think just knowing that over time, it would be interesting to see how much that extra source fluctuates. Is it reliable at the same percentage every month? Is it going to go up and down? It'll be just more volatile. It would just be really interesting to be able to study that, the impact. Yeah, thank you.
Of course.
All right.
Thank you for administrative update. The Eastern Corridor, if you've been in that area at all, there is significant utility improvements being conducted out there, not just by the town of Lyons putting in our new forced sewer main, but Longmont is replacing their large raw water line. Excel is replacing a gas line. There's a company putting in fiber, as well as our sewer. So it is really torn up out there. And in order to try to survey and map some of those utilities, the closing with Paul Tamburello was extended to this Thursday, February 20th. We should be closing on that property. And if you recall, at our last meeting, he was thinking he did not want to acquire the railroad right-of-way because there is such extensive utilities within it that it wouldn't be very feasible to build much on it. However, recently found out that the environmental cleanup we did in that area, if you recall, we did arsenic cleanup from the railroad. The Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment has said that it looks like it's pretty well good to go. So now he's interested again. So there has been some changes, and Paul Glasgow has been very busy with trying to get this mapped and recorded so that we can close. So we are scheduled to close on the purchase of those properties this Thursday. I believe most folks know we had a public meeting to review the new CHAMP maps with folks. Last month we met with people outside of Lyons, but in our area to look at the new flood maps. This time we held a meeting specific with Lyons residents. We had really good attendance, probably 35 to 40 people were there, except we did not have FEMA insurance folks there because of the weather that night. So they are requesting that potentially we hold one more meeting with FEMA insurance to come up and speak directly with folks. In the meantime, their contact information is available, and they're happy to answer questions if people have them till we can get that scheduled. They said their March and April is quite full with these public meetings that are being required by the map changes. So we have set up a separate web page on our website specifically about the flood mapping process, remapping process, impact to insurance, and how to link to the state sites that you can put in your own address and see how it affects you individually. So we're trying to stay on top of that, and we'll continue the public comment and appeal period. We are anticipating, they haven't announced the official date, but we're expecting it to be the first week in March. The 90-day period for comment and appeal will begin, and we'll do a substantial publication about that so we don't miss anyone. Summit Housing, I think all of you know that they submitted a substantially complete application. It is out for review to, more than a dozen referral agencies. And some folks have said, who is that or what is that? Those are people, public entities and organizations that have a direct interest in the property, so they get a chance to look at those plans in detail and give us feedback before it goes to our planning commission. And so those are due back from those referral agencies on February 21st, end of day. And then it will go to planning commission to review their comments and look at it again from a zoning and land use perspective in Lyons. So recall that this process is for Tract A only. The single-family housing along Summit is already entitled and platted for single-family homes.
Can I give a little more
Sure.
timeline on that? So
Sure.
just in addition to what Administrator Simonson said, I just wanted to note that we believe the PCDC meeting on the development plan itself will be March 9th, and that March 16th will be the BOT's consideration of the development agreement. It's a separate process. And my plan is to have a memo kind of summarizing the timeline going forward on this this week. Wanted to have it for this meeting, but was not able to do the other things we had going on. But that's what we're anticipating in addition to the timeframes that Administrator Simonson talked about.
Okay. Also, you may have been hearing about this on the news, Highway 36 up at mile marker 8 near Estes Park is due to start its partial closure, and then we'll go into a 30-day full closure on March 9th. They will be hosting an open house in Lyons on February 25th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the library for people who will be impacted by that. So we are also trying to help them get that information out there to the public. Under community services, this last couple of weeks, we hosted the Old Man Winter Race. The running portion was well attended. The bike race was canceled or cut short by CDOT. It was truly considered a safety hazard to be biking in the conditions. So they had a solid turnout, and there's been positive feedback. No plans to reschedule that we've heard. And we had our last Winter Wonderland concert in Laverne Johnson Park recently. Again, great partnership between the town and the Lions Community Foundation and nonprofit organizations to do some outreach and fundraising at those events. I think they were well attended, and we'll probably try to do those again next year. I'm going to cut down to just a couple other things. We want people to know that we have moved our park shelter and pavilion rental online, like we did with camping. And so you no longer have to reach out to the front desk. You don't have to come in. You can just do it online now. So that should free up staff significantly. I don't know if people understand how well utilized those facilities are. So that has moved online, and so we want to encourage people to start using that instead of having to come into town hall. And last, there's one other announcement. RTD is going to be hosting a meeting here on February 20th. Is that correct? Yeah, Thursday night at 6 p.m. at Town Hall to talk about a proposed service cut for services between Lyons and Boulder. So that's important. People come for that if that impacts them significantly. And last but not least, we did have a water main break today on our main high-pressure line in Apple Valley around the 1700 block. So water has been off to about 5 residences since 11 or 12 today. We received a note recently that they are charging the line, so they did stay and work into the night and plan to have water back on here any time. So hopefully that has not been too much of an inconvenience and able to get that back on. But that will be an unexpected water cost repair. I don't know the cause yet. So, any questions on that portion? And then we were going to talk a little bit about the Ped Bridge.
Any questions? Trustee Roberts.
Yeah. Just referring to the Summit Development Plan filing. So to be clear, there's no anomalies in following all regulations and procedures for appeals period and notification to the referral agencies. We're 100% compliant, and that knowledge is available to everyone.
All of the referral agencies are sent a packet, and with the the directions and the timeframe. The only area that I heard there was a little confusion was 14 days. And actually, in our code, it is 14 business days. So we have allowed 14 business days, which is beyond what a lot of people thought it was going to be. So they actually got an extra couple weekends and a President's Day for review. So no, there's no anomalies. Everything, as far as I have been told, is following
Cool.
protocol.
And everyone has access to understanding that. All of our trustee candidates have easy access to understanding that.
It's in Chapter 16, Article 7 of the Town Code. It lays it out step by step.
Right.
Of course, things like appeals, we won't know until a decision is rendered whether there'll even be an appeal. So I can't comment on that, but we're closely following that schedule as we go through this process.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, do you want to do a quasi judicial reminder?
Yeah, I was going to do that as part of my
Okay.
my legal report as a reminder to everyone running for the board that there is now submitted application on the table. That means that the quasi judicial requirements do apply to the application for Summit, which means that you can't prejudge the application. Everything you must consider as part of the eventual decision, if there were to be a board decision and certainly a PCDC decision on the application itself, can only be within the context of that meeting. And so it just caution everyone not to do anything that would make an appearance of prejudging the application or relying upon information that's not contained within the application. And so just a word of caution. And I will hopefully soon be sending out an email to all candidates who have filed with the town clerk, just some resources on quasi-judicial applications of what is and what is not permitted.
So, and just to kind of add to that, if someone has rendered what could be perceived as an opinion on that matter, they would potentially have to recuse themselves from being able to vote on that issue should it come to the board and they're elected.
That's correct. I mean, of course, that analysis would have to be done on a case-by-case basis, but if someone did have a conflict due to a quasi-judicial conflict, the town would either have to require that person to recuse themselves or the entire decision itself could be subject to challenge. So it's important not to conflict yourself moving forward on this pending application.
Thank you. Trustee Farrell.
So for clarity, really what you're saying is candidates that are not sitting on the board, but candidates that are running really should put themselves in a considered quasi-judicial potential and be cognizant of what they're saying currently.
Or may have to recuse.
Or may have to recuse
Yeah,
themselves if they're
both
elected.
the current board and future candidates. I mean, right now, the timeframes are such that this current board should be ruling on most of the required approvals. But if for whatever reason those approvals would have to extend beyond this board, this issue would arise. And so I think this board's aware of the quasi-judicial procedures, but just want to alert candidates who may not be as familiar that this could be an issue for them, and just wanted to flag that issue. So.
Thank you.
And then just one more item that we want to just make I'm sorry.
Trustee
I'm
Brennan?
sorry.
About the
That podium
Summit
voice.
application and review process. Right now, we're at the step where the application's been forwarded to referral agencies.
Correct.
And the code says referral agencies will be given 14 business days to provide comments. Comments provided by referral agencies will be communicated to the applicant in a written site plan or development plan review report prepared by the town administrator within 28 business days after receiving the complete application process. So if some of the referral agencies submit comments that require responses, then as I understand it, you as the town administrator do a report to the applicant, to Summit, about what the referral agency's comments are, and then Summit has a chance to revise things to
And address them.
deal with those. So, and the time periods for them to respond, as far as I could see, aren't specified. So has that been factored into the potential dates, that if the referral agencies have something to say and Summit needs to respond to that, that there'll be adequate time for those things to happen?
Yeah, and we have not received any comments back from the referral agencies to my knowledge.
Okay.
Not yet.
But we are,
No comment.
one no comment. But we are factoring that into some degree. I mean, it's a tight time frame, admittedly, But we think we can turn it around quickly, projecting out what those referral comments might be.
But they can happen simultaneously. So while the Planning Commission is doing their review, I can be preparing comments to Summit.
I
I mean, they can be addressing the referral agencies while Planning Commission's doing their review.
I think that, the administrator's review and the referrals may be done concurrently. If the PCDC meeting is far enough out where we'll have completed that report prior to the PCDC. There needs to be public notice of what the application is. The application has to be done prior to the PCDC ruling on the development plan, obviously. There has to be a public notice, 15 days pursuant to the requirements of the code, on what that final plan is that's up for their consideration. And so we will have this resolved prior to that date.
If we get comments from referral agencies, will those be public record documents?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to request, just on behalf of me and maybe the rest of the board too, if we get those, if it's part of the public record, that would be part of our quasi-judicial review process, if we could see those,
That would certainly be part of PCDC's packet, I would assume. I mean, I've not done one of these with Lions yet, but with other government entities, we've included those as part of the package, so.
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And then just want to give a heads up to the Board of Trustees that for your March 2nd meeting, we are gearing up resolutions on accepting the Safe Routes to School grant or not. And so I put a separate memo in your packet tonight regarding the funding, because there was a request of how would we fund that project. So I just want to refresh your memory that to accept the Safe Routes to School grant is not just putting in the bridge. There's some confusion there of why is this so expensive. Safe Routes to School will cover the area from the intersection up at the elementary school at 4th and High all the way to the Bone Park entrance at the end of 4th. And so it's a safe route all the way to school, not just a bridge. So the cost of that entire project, the engineer's opinion of cost, which includes all of the soft costs such as engineering and design and those things, as well as hard cost construction management, contingency, and those equals $855,000. So the Safe Routes to School grant would cover $500,000 of those costs. The town would still be responsible for $355,000. So to be able to accept the Safe Routes to School grant, which they are wanting to know if we're going to take their money or not, because if not, they need to reallocate it to another community who can spend that. We need to, on March 2nd, decide if this board is willing to commit $355,000 if we are not able to get it through other grants and fundraising efforts. So Kim Mitchell and I have, and our engineers have identified grants totaling $355,000. We have been able to locate that much. All of those grants are due between March 15th and October 15th of this year. And it would mean Kim is writing, what was it, 15 grants? No. Oh, it was a lot. But we've identified all sorts of grants ranging from $5,000 up to, I think our biggest is $50,000 that we will apply for. We have no problem doing that. But the board has to be able to commit to safe routes, that if we were not to get any of those, you still are going to fund the other 355. So we just want to gear you up for that discussion and make sure that you're considering it, because one of the alternatives is not to accept the Safe Routes to School grant and instead just put in a bridge and use your own funding for that. So we want you to start thinking about the, if you recall, the Safe Routes to School grant is a federal grant, similar, it was the same funding source, the Federal Highway administration that we did on the Main Street project, the original Main Street project that was very complex and frustrating for folks. It's the same grant. We have built in a contract, a project manager for this to do that paperwork, so it would not be staff trying to do it in between other projects. But we need to think about this seriously. But we are very hopeful we can apply for $355,000. We were very conservative in our estimates of looking at potentially acquiring 60% of that. And then the rest would be through potentially your park donation, if you feel this meets that, qualifies for that. The parks reserves, general fund reserves through streets and sidewalks, or potentially conservation trust. So we can come up with the funding to do the project if the board so chooses, but we just have to be ready on March 2nd to pass a resolution one way or another to let Safe Routes to School know at your next meeting.
Thank you.
Welcome. And we have a new artist rendition of that, what used to be an atrocious approach. It was in your packet. I don't have the color version. If people have seen that before, the bridge itself is about 100 feet, a little more, a little less. The approach is just as long to keep it out of the floodway. And so instead of visualizing it as we had previously with a white CAD drawing, we had an artist rendition using a very similar boardwalk approach that we have at Bone Park. And so it looks really nice. And I will print a color copy of that, but
Bless you.
let me pass that down. It was in your packets too. That's all for tonight.
Okay.
For me. You have any other legal?
No, I covered what I was going to talk about, so thank you.
Thanks. I did have a question for you about the situation with Mr. Freisig. Do you have any update on that? I got a call from Representative Singer's office, I think is referencing potentially that. Is that effective this Friday? Or do you know what the effective date is?
The effective date of?
The eviction?
So the court has not ruled on that yet. We are still waiting to file some supporting documentation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something else. Are we evicting anyone else?
No,
Okay.
he's the only person we're evicting at the moment.
I assume that's what it
If you remember correctly, we had some utility stuff out there. We kind of waited until that had been resolved. The filings are ready to go. We just need to sign one additional document, and then it goes.
He doesn't have a notice right now.
He doesn't. I mean, we've already sent him his notice of eviction. Just the court has not ruled on whether to kick him out or not. So.
Okay. I got a pretty urgent phone call about it, so I'll follow up and let them know that there's nothing imminent, really. There's no deadline this Friday or anything like that.
He's already missed his deadline, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I may need some additional information
Okay.
just to
Yep.
make sure I can
Please feel
respond.
free to
Okay.
reach out.
All right, thank you. All right. Next up on the agenda is audience business. This is the portion of the meeting where the audience can approach the board on topics that are not on tonight's agenda as a public hearing. We do have two public hearings scheduled tonight. One is for Ordinance 1078, which is an ordinance to clarify littering and illegal dumping violations. And we also have Ordinance 1076, which is modifying sections of the Lyons Municipal Code, excuse me, modifying utility code. If you're here to speak to one of those two items, please wait until the public hearing for those two ordinances come up on the agenda. Otherwise, other topics you're free to bring forward at this time. Please give your name and address for the record when you come forward, and each person will have 4 minutes. Do we have a sign-up sheet?
We do. I've got Monica McGuckin on Apple Valley Road.
4 minutes?
4.
Hi, Monica McGuckin, Apple Valley Road, and I'm here representing the Apple Valley neighborhood. This was done very quickly this afternoon. It's a first draft, and I hope to have a final draft and letter to each of you. Is it protocol for me to hand out this copy to you?
You can, or you can, if you have enough for everybody.
Otherwise, you're using your time.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Dear Mayor Sullivan and trustees, it recently came to the attention of Apple Valley Road residents that Boulder County, BOCO, has offered 10 parcels of land designated as 404 buyout properties, which will be referred to as buyout properties, to the town of Lyons. These restricted deed properties have been of interest to neighbors on Apple Valley since they were so designated, and many of us have been in communication with BOCO regarding them. We were told the neighborhood lease program was being developed and we would be contacted once that was in place. We were surprised to find that the town of Lyons commissions were discussing possible uses for these properties and that Lyons is considering taking on the stewardship of these bits and pieces along BOCO Residential Street. Before and since we have heard of the potential transfer of properties, neighbors on Apple Valley Road have made multiple attempts to speak with BOCO representatives. The BOCO contacts have changed multiple times, and the current representative is on a leave and not returning until February 25th. The community of neighbors on Apple Valley Road actively seeking options with BOCO. We were brought into this discussion late. We stand to be the most impacted by a town decision of which we currently have no representation. We are requesting that we have more time to discuss this decision and that the town postpone any scheduled vote. After consulting with former BOCO attorney Joe French, we understand our rights as BOCO landowners may supersede any pending agreements. A second draft of this letter will be submitted in your trustee packet with signatures next Monday, February 24th. I'm making that assumption that I'll be able to do that. I'll find out if that's true. We appreciate your consideration of our request for more time and a delay on a trustee vote. And thank you for your service to Lyons. I do want to say that we were included in the PCDC meeting with Paul, so he heard and took feedback from neighbors. We were pretty congenial, but we do know that this is all part of the long-term planning agreement with Boulder County, and we do believe that there is an agenda to annex Apple Valley Road, and I would just want to say that I believe the majority of residents on Apple Valley would not want to be annexed at this time. So that's kind of the overriding impetus, we believe. So any questions?
We can't ask questions.
No, we can't
That's
ask
okay.
questions.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Next one.
Next one is Nick Angelo on Ute Highway. Nicholas Angelo, I'm sorry.
Nicholas Angelo, 4089 Ute Highway. I found the hotel feasibility study quite interesting. Of the three sites, we have one on the eastern corridor that has parking capabilities, although ingress and egress might be somewhat of a problem. We have the Riverbend site that may have also ingress and egress and floodplain problems. And then the site that was pointed out as the most probable, as I understood it. I'll tell you what the problem with that one is. Parking. Parking. Not just for the employees of the hotel, but for the people that stay there. We have a parking problem downtown now. I can't even imagine what it would be like if we had a hotel at that particular location. And I know Joe French, and he is formidable indeed.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to speak that did not sign up? You're welcome to come up. Okay, we'll close audience business. Thank you. We have two public hearings on our agenda tonight. The first one is ordinance 1078. Would the clerk please introduce the item into the record?
Yes, this is the second reading, public hearing on ordinance 1078, an ordinance of the town of Lyons, Colorado, amending sections of the Lyons Municipal Code to clarify littering and illegal dumping violations.
Okay, is there a staff report or presentation on this ordinance?
Yeah, so this was an ordinance, if you remember, that was created in response to a problem at the town recycling center where rubbish materials, non-recyclable materials were being dropped off at the town recycling center. Myself, the town prosecutor, and Sergeant Christ worked together on creating this ordinance to clean up some of the sections to make it very clear that putting such unauthorized materials into the town recycling center or other non-appropriate areas would be a violation of the town code. And so we created just these updates and created also a penalty provision section which mirrors the recent updates to the general code and parks violations we worked on recently, you may remember. So that's the, I guess, the general intent of what we were trying to do. And I've attached to you both a red lined and a clean copy as part of your ordinance for you to review.
Okay, are there questions at this point for staff? Trustee Farrell?
I was just wondering, because you reference the garbage trash going within, into the recyclable, receptacle.
Receptacles, yeah.
Sorry about that. Is that too specific? Would it be better to say into or next to?
We can, yeah.
Okay. I just was wondering if it's necessary or not, because I know that there have been things that have been dumped right next to the bins that were too heavy to put into the bins.
No, that's a good point.
So I just didn't know if that was needed.
No, it's a good point. It's just
Okay.
something you don't always, think about. It's a problem with writing code is that you don't think about all the different permutations of that could happen. So thank you for the comment.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we open the public hearing? Okay, we'll open the public hearing for ordinance 1078. Would anyone like to speak to this item? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion, please? Anybody? Any motion? Go ahead.
I would move for the adoption of ordinance number 1078 regarding garbage, rubbish and trash.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any comments or amendments that anyone would like to offer?
Yes. I've just passed out a list of potential amendments, and let me provide these to the town clerk.
Got it.
You already got it? Okay, good. I think there are a few things that need to be cleaned up, and there are 5 of them, and some of them are really simple, and some of them need a little bit of explanation. So if it's okay, I guess I'll do them, should I do it all at once or one by one?
If they're
Maybe easier.
more, if they're not substantive, I think you can do them as a group.
Okay.
If there's anything substantive, then I think we should do it as an independent
Yeah,
amendment.
Items number 1, 2, and 3 are pretty perfunctory, not really substantive. I think they're totally consistent with the intent of what's meant here. The way the existing code and the change are drafted, if you look at section 7.3-40, it prohibits unauthorized dumping of garbage, trash, or refuse. Well, about 2 sections earlier in this part of the code, there's some defined terms. One of them is capitalized junk, one of them is capitalized rubbish. And you look at the definition of what rubbish is, and that's what picks up most of the kind of stuff that we've had problems with at the recycle bins. It's old furniture, appliances, construction materials, and that sort of thing. So I think that we ought to add the defined terms junk and rubbish to 7.340, which is the main section we're dealing with, to make it really clear that we're talking about those types of things, because otherwise you've got them defined in one section and then not referred to at all in the section that prohibits the unauthorized dumping, and if you just read it at face value, why'd they leave those things out? So I think those need to be added.
Can I just suggest for that, since it is
Okay.
changing, let
All
me
right.
do that as an amendment,
Okay.
and then we can deal, the other two, I
All
think,
right.
are
I would move
capitalization
to
things.
amend the proposed ordinance by adding in section 7-3-40 after the word trash, capitalized junk and capitalized rubbish.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion on the proposed amendment?
Just in 7340?
And in 7-3-20, excuse me, amend my amendment, it should be referenced both 7-3-20 and 7-3-40, because they both use those same terms.
I
Thank you.
assume that's good with the seconder as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? All right, I'll call for the vote on the amendment. All right, the amendment carries 7-0. Thank you.
And then I'll try to do the next two at once. In both 7-3-20 and 7-3-40, it talks about garbage with a lowercase g, and garbage is also a defined term on up in the code. And if you don't be consistent, somebody may wonder, oh, did they really mean it to say what it says up there in the definition 2 sections earlier, or they mean something else? So that's really just capitalize that to pick up the definition earlier. And then a reverse situation, the existing code capitalizes the word dumpster for some reason, but dumpster is not defined anywhere. So the question is, why they use a capitalized term when everybody knows what a dumpster is? So my suggestion is lowercase that, and if you lowercase something, don't treat it as a defined term, then it just has its common meaning, which is, I think, probably what was intended. So it's basically capitalized garbage and lowercase the word dumpster.
I think, can we all agree we're good with those being treated as
Okay.
errata? Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Then next one would be a substantive amendment, and I would move to amend section 7-3-60, subsection D, to add this language at the end of that subsection. And it would say, in addition to such penalty, which is $75 on the first offense and $150 on the second offense. So in addition to such penalty, the town may assess against any violator of this section or any rules promulgated under this section any costs, including without limitation, disposal and transportation costs, as well as town staff time incurred by the town to remedy the violations.
I'll second that.
And the reason for this is I assume that the $75 and the $150 fines were worked out among the town attorney, the sheriff's office, and the prosecutor. And those seem a bit low to me, but if that's what they think is appropriate, fine with me. However, I think we've already had situations where we had to haul away some materials and it cost the town, I remember $200, something like that. So it seems to me if we have to do that again, that we ought to be able to recover that. If we can identify the person who violated it, we ought to be able to recover our costs as an additional penalty. And I think what happened that other time was they found who it was, and they gave the person that they had identified the option of, you come back and get this stuff and get rid of it, or if we have to haul it off, we're going to charge you with something. And I think they did come and do it. So I would hope that the sheriff's office would still give the people that option. But if they don't, and they just say, nope, not going to, your problem, and the town has to spend money to take care of it, then we should be able to go after them for the cost. Otherwise, first offense, $75, and if your transportation fees and tipping fees and whatever,
business decision,
it might be cheaper for them to pay the fine. So I think we need to add the ability to recover costs, and that's why I make that amendment.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I do have one thought, which may have to come as an amendment to this amendment, which would be to add, as well as town staff or other authorized individual or organization.
Okay?
Yeah.
So I would accept
In
that
case we hire
amendment. In
somebody.
case you contract it out. Yep.
Just a question on that. I mean, could we not just
Say town
give this
costs.
to the town administrator? I mean, ultimately, they would be,
As well as costs incurred to remedy.
Because I think in this section, the way I read it is it would be the town assessing the fees and fines for the court, correct? So would it come back to the court?
Town may assess. I think this would include any contractor costs. This says any town costs, including
Oh, I see what
the
you're
list.
saying. Okay, I'm sorry.
But
I was
think the
thinking you
issue
were
about
talking about.
who actually collects the penalty and how it's collected is a separate question. I think it's a good one, potentially, that the town may assess and the municipal judge may enforce an order assessing X costs is a good one, but it probably needs to be a separate.
That was actually my question, is
Yeah.
I support the concept of giving us flexibility to recover any costs the town might incur. It's just how
How's it enforced?
process-wise, is this easy to do in time, do we know what those costs are at the time where they would go through this process, I guess? It's just, or could they get a bill later? Maybe we don't have to
Yeah,
get that far in the weeds here, but I just want to make sure if we do it, is it
Wait, I think it's
is
already
it
fine the way
practical
is.
and something we can actually administer through the court process?
Perhaps the administrator's rules could cover that in terms
Yeah,
of
it could.
procedure of
I
how
think
you
it
would
could,
do that.
which is the reason why I put that in there.
And if they end up writing a check to the court along with their $75 or $150 fee, ultimately that comes to the town anyway, right?
Right, and I guess the town could also just send them a bill if we decide we're not gonna write them into court, and then if they don't pay it, we could put it against their property taxes. So,
Okay.
Just one point about the reason for trying to expand a little bit beyond town costs is because if Lions Volunteers, for example, would pick up a refrigerator that was left there, which is a possibility, not,
Reality.
right, then, that could end up being $30, and that sort of thing, and, I don't think the Lions Volunteers should bear that cost.
so I guess originally, I thought you were asking that we include in the list other things, but it's really the last piece is incurred by the town, or it's a signee or permittee.
Or could we just take out the town, just costs incurred?
Incurred.
And then
You
you
could do that
don't
as well.
have to
Yep.
expand to whoever it could be. It just, any cost that's incurred could be,
Yep, I agree.
that might fix it as well.
Town or designate to remedy.
Or it could be Boulder County Sheriff's Office. I mean,
So you could say just
I think costs incurred is probably sufficient.
Okay.
by the town or designate to remedy. So if the town asks the volunteers to take care of it, or we ask the sheriff, we can still get that cost.
So
Yeah.
would that be a further amendment to strike the words "by the town"?
Yeah.
Okay. I would.
Yeah,
So-
I did want to add a comment because why broadening it actually could be very important. I do recall a circumstance in which there was a glass bottle, three-quarter full of something with a cloth wick stuffed in it. That's a little scary, And there could be other things that are either frightening or actually dangerous, literally dangerous, that need specialized handling. And so I think we want it to be as broad as possible.
So is there a proposed second amendment to the amendment to remove the words "by the town" in the second half of or the last part of the sentence?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion on that change?
Can I read back
Please.
what I have? So this is amending Part D. In addition to such penalties, the town may assess against the violator of this section or any rules promulgated under this section, any costs, including without limitation, disposal and transportation costs, as well as town staff time incurred to remedy the violations.
That's my understanding of the motion.
Yes.
Is there any further discussion?
You want it to say town staff? I thought we were taking that out. I thought it
It's
was
the
as
second
well
part.
as costs incurred to remedy the violation.
I think the only problem I heard was that we were limiting it to costs incurred directly by the town, and we want it to be any costs incurred,
Correct.
period, regardless of
Yep.
who incurred the cost, they could get recouped.
But it still says.
This is included without limitation, any cost incurred.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't see that part being.
That's just in case some town staffer ends up spending 3 hours trying to arrange for all this stuff. They ought to be able to collect their hourly costs. So, and that's including without limitation, so it could be other things.
All right. We do. Yeah. So I'll call the vote on the second amendment. All right, that carries 7-0. Are there any other comments on the overall amendment? Call for the vote on the overall amendment, which also carries 7-0. Thank you.
And then the last amendment is trying to really just cure what looks like, it's kind of an absurdity in the language, it's not intended. That section 7-3-40 is entitled unauthorized use of receptacles, but then the first sentence that prohibits doing all this stuff says no person shall deposit or discard, and lists all these things, including recyclables, in any recycling receptacle. Well, of course they can deposit recyclables in recycling receptacles. So what's really meant there is what the title implies, which is they shouldn't do that without authority. Well, anybody in town or living who comes to the center with recyclables is authorized to do that. So there's a limiting phrase, and I was trying to figure out how to fix that absurdity. There's a clause in there that says, unless such person has by ownership, lease, permit, or place of residence an established legal right to the use of such garbage or trash receptacle. I think if we strike the phrase by ownership, lease, permit, or place of residence, and it just says, unless such person has an established legal right to the use of such garbage or trash receptacle, dumpster, composting receptacle, anybody in town or anybody that uses the recycle center has a legal right to use it. We don't prohibit anybody from using it for recyclables. So I think if you just strike that limiting phrase, what's left would, I don't think anybody would question the legal right of somebody to bring recyclables to the recyclable. So my actual amendment is to strike the phrase by ownership, lease, permit, or place of residence. I think that fixes it.
If you just give me a second to read it back as amended.
There may be a better way to do it.
Yeah, and I was trying to work with the
I
existing
agree with you.
code.
It's a kind of a clunky sentence.
Right.
The sentence did seem to make sense to me if you read it all the way through.
It's hard to
because at
read,
the
but it did
end,
make sense. Yeah.
It does say you can't do any of these things unless you have a right to do them, essentially, is the way. I agree it could be, we could probably improve the wording to make it a bit
I thought
clearer.
about starting it by saying, no person without authority shall deposit, discard, whatever. But then you get into that phrase later, it says, unless you've got an established legal right by ownership, lease, permit, or anything. But that doesn't cover people who would just bring stuff to the recycling center. Of course, they have a right to use it. So I think it is kind of a clunky sentence overall, but the way it reads now is, it looks like you can't deposit recyclables in a recycling receptacle unless you have a lease, permit, place of residence, whatever.
I think
Let me have Trustee Roberts have
I was just going to say, isn't this also
respond?
trying to cover the cases of illegally dumping into your neighbors?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's and it's precisely what this was originally intended to do. I actually like taking out the Trustee Browning's amendment because it does cover the other option of the recycling center. Where if you don't have a legal right to do it, then you shouldn't be able to. So I like that amendment. It does take out some of the length of this too. Makes it read a little better.
So did you actually make the amendment?
Yeah, I offered them, but it hasn't been seconded, though. I don't think. I played around with this. That's the best way I could figure out.
Let me, before, is there a second, and then we can have discussion?
Second.
Okay. Trustee Roberts, did you still have a comment? You're good. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, this is just a question because I don't know. Since it is funded ultimately by Boulder County, can someone outside of Boulder County literally have the legal right to use it? That's a question.
It's still our property. It doesn't matter who funds it, and it's up to us to determine the rules of who is trespassing and who is not trespassing. So it's up to the town administrator essentially to determine who's authorized to use it.
I'd almost guarantee you that some Larimer County residents in Pinewood use it.
Oh, no, I'm
Yeah.
sure it happens. I'm just wondering if there are any legal implications there. Okay.
I actually think the amendment is fine, and I would vote for it. I don't think it substantively changes the
It doesn't.
purpose, and so I think we still have what we need in the sentence, and probably does help you not lose track.
Yeah, it's just a little shorter, easy to read
Yeah.
by reducing the
Yeah,
length.
so I'm comfortable with the amendment. Is there any other comments or questions? All right, I'll call for the vote on the amendment. And it carries 7-0. Thank you.
That's all, folks.
Anyone else? Trustee Farrell?
I just have an amendment to section 7-3-40. I'd like to amend the first sentence of the two paragraphs. The first one being, no person shall deposit or discard any garbage, trash, refuse, or recyclables in or next to any garbage, trash, so on and so forth. So in, and then add the word and next to.
Okay, well, let's have a
Yes.
second. Well,
sorry. Maybe say near instead of next to.
That's
You wanna put a-
recyclable in or near. Thank you. In addition, no person shall deposit or discard any materials in or near a receptacle not intended. So that's the first sentence of the second paragraph.
okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, we'll call for the vote on the amendment. All right, and it carries 7-0. Thank you. Any others? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote on the overall ordinance, 1078. And it passes 7-0. Thank you. Next ordinance.
The next ordinance is the second reading of public hearing for ordinance 1076, an ordinance of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, modifying sections of the Lyons Municipal Code, to modify the utility code. That was typed in there weird.
All right, is there a staff report?
Yes, so Aaron Kaplan, Lions Interim Utility Coordinator, and over the last couple of years, there had been some discussion and requests at various times from the board to look over some of the administrative portions of the utility code. So the UEB has gone through and reviewed a bunch of the portions of that code, including some of the discussion on interest for delinquent utility accounts, working on how the appeals process works when somebody wants to appeal a decision, some of the information on what actually happens if somebody enters into a payment plan with the town, the need for notifying the board when an outstanding balance gets to be excessively high, and a number of other what we'd call administrative enforcement type portions of the code. So we did have the workshop on that at the last meeting and went over some discussion on modifications to that based on the board's input, and then have the actual ordinance that's in front of you tonight. That's the report.
Are there other questions for staff? Trustee Farrell?
I had a question. I was just curious. Under cure for deficiencies, there was some significant changes on like number 2, 6 months installments when prior it was 24 months. And I was just kind of, so I'm questioning why such a drastic change there. In addition to the number 3, for non-residentials, it went from 12 months to 3 months. And is that just a sort of a standard that happens in other communities, or was there some reasoning about
We had looked over some different information on that. Some of that was in looking at how much the outstanding balance would be and the length of time it might take to pay that off. That if you let it go that long, you may be incurring balances that are going to get excessively high. And so in the discussion, it had turned out that it looked like we should be reducing that to prevent the town's liability from some of those balances getting to be too high. The time frame to pay them off, we had some specific notes from the UEB. I don't have them in front of me.
Because I see this as more of a, this is, correct me if I'm wrong, the time frame to pay them off. And we went from 24 months, which I do think is a long time, but then suddenly down to 6-month period. So, and then from 12 months to 3 months. So it's not the accumulation of time, how long that bill has gone without being paid, as much as now I'm here, I'm ready to pay it, but I need some help in a time frame. And so I was just curious on that element. My first reaction was 12 months instead of 24, 6 months instead of 12 months. I'm open, but I just was sort of trying to get the justification for.
Right, I had really thought we had cut them in half, that they
Okay.
were 12 and 6. But
Okay.
it sounds like if they weren't that I don't see why we went. Again, I know at some points we had some different code. I don't think anything with this was incorrect at the time the UEB looked at it. But from our discussions, I recall us thinking that we should be reducing that. And part of that being when the balance is out that high, looking at when you're going to actually try to send an outstanding balance to become a lien on the property also came into effect. And that if you have somebody, in particular business accounts, that may be going up to a substantial amount, and that then there's a much greater chance if they're having trouble making their payments that they go into bankruptcy, and allowing a longer period of time, again, puts the town at more risk for not being able to collect the outstanding balance.
I'm just curious, what does staff think is considered reasonable?
24 months is too long. I think most people probably require you to pay back payments in, honestly, 30 days to 90 days. So to me, I'm more than happy to work with people up to a year, but it should not go past that. I think 6 months to 12 months is reasonable. Very reasonable, actually.
And I'm not sure if maybe the board doesn't know how that works. So we, if they're past due 1 month, they get the shut-off notice, then they would come in and say, I just can't pay it this month. So then what we do is we take that balance and completely clear it out, and we can break it into 3 months, however many months. Then they have to keep their current balance. And then if it's a $30 additional contract payment, they have to keep that current every time. If there's one time that they miss a payment, that contract goes away. So he's right, though, if you stretch it out that hard, you're just, but it does give them a lot of flexibility, I think, because for the
12
most
months
part,
is
yeah.
So, well, what would you prefer? Would you prefer 6 months or 12 months?
You were saying you thought it was 12 months, Erin.
But it's what's written is 6 months.
Yes.
Right. No, I was thinking that it was 12 and 6 being reduced to 6 and 3.
Okay.
So I'm still not sure what.
It's
would you
really,
prefer?
it's the board's decision.
I think we can take care of that as an amendment if we want to try to see if the board is supportive of changing that. So, well,
But we do see, there's just people that are regularly on that, who have a payment plan, and we work with them however we can. We try to remind them, too, that it's already a hardship to pay that month sometimes, and then to pay that extra just really gets them behind. So we can support either, but I would not go over 12 months.
Trustee Carvis?
Oh, just to clarify, I could have sworn we came up with the 3 and 6. It was higher. I thought we lowered it in one of our discussions about a month and a half ago because Aaron had been here several times on this issue. This is not the first or second time we've been here. I could have sworn, I might be confusing all the different meetings we've had, workshops and UEB meetings, but I could have sworn we discussed that before, did we? Or am I confusing the meetings? Sound familiar, everybody?
I don't remember.
Really?
I may have missed I may have been a meeting I was not.
Okay.
Okay. Did you have a question?
No, that was just clarifying. I could have
Okay.
sworn we did something, we had something to do with that.
And maybe
But
come back and
I'm
forth. Okay.
confusing my meetings.
That's okay. I did have a question for you on the last, same section, number 6. The language there, it seems to tie the notification to the approval limit for the town administrator for service contracts. Can you just remind me, is that limit $10,000? What
For
is it?
services, is $10,000. For construction, is $20,000. So
Okay.
it'd be $10,000.
So it'd be a 10,000. I'm just curious kind of why that versus just plugging in a number or something that is clear in the code as to what triggers that for free. Just curious. But
And that had also been discussed quite a bit, I think, at the workshop where you weren't at
Okay.
with the Board of
Sorry.
Trustees. That it was one number then, as things change, if that amount goes up, then it goes up with it, and you don't have to go in and try to change the code. There had been some discussion before about going in and needing to adjust the administrator's amount. A year ago or so, you guys went and decided to raise the amount that the administrator could have. That was at least the discussion I remember hearing from the other trustees. So some of it saying we can have it just go with that so that we don't have to go back and adjust the code. But
okay.
otherwise, I think we had an amount in there from the UEB.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? All right. I'm going to open the public hearing on ordinance 1076. Would anyone like to speak to this ordinance? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion for the ordinance?
I move for approval of ordinance 1076.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion or amendments?
I had, I guess it's somewhat of a request, and that is that throughout this ordinance and across the town language, I guess, we use sewer, wastewater, sanitation, department, and I thought about trying to make it all consistent through here, and I couldn't do it. So I'm wondering if there could be a paragraph somewhere that sort of untangled it.
I think we can. I can go into that. I actually, as the UEB chair, was really pushing the previous utility director to try to do that last year. And there were some,
You're gonna be
actually, I
talking
don't
to yourself.
remember them specifically, but then there are some connotations in the billing system and how it's worded, and using, one was having, there was something with the coding itself, but yes, I agree and would be happy to try to work on that.
Yeah, I'm suggesting, and maybe it's done offline, maybe a paragraph somewhere that describes it so that, you know, wastewater means what goes through the pipes, the plant is the wastewater treatment plant, sewer is the
Yep.
department made up of.
We could even insert a definition for sewer that equals all of those things, potentially. Is that,
One concern is because sanitation is listed in there as some of it, and we had the concern of what happens if you do start to have to bill for trash, which is sanitation. So then you're getting some more wording that we do want to clear up. That's why we wanted to try to remove sanitation maybe from wastewater. So,
Yeah, but I don't know how to do it, so I can't make an amendment, but, you know, at some point, someone.
All right. Could we just consider that, I mean, we have the authority to kind of make those kinds of cleanup changes
Yep.
after the fact?
in this section, it's
For
always sewer, it looks
consistency,
like.
yeah.
But I know elsewhere in the code, it's not. There are some wastewater references that could be changed to sewer potentially. But there's only wastewater and sewer mentioned in this article of the code, yep. This section, I just said.
Mayor Pro Tem.
But the point is, across, I mean,
Yep.
it just gets confusing, sort of town-wide language.
Oh, yeah.
So if the financials say sanitation, but sanitation appears nowhere in the ordinance, it could be confusing to somebody, especially if it's looked at in a rearview mirror 5 years from now or 10 years from now.
Is there a preference as to what we want to call it, I guess?
Actually, my preference would be a paragraph that somewhere, it may not be in this section of the code, that says these words are used to mean and occasionally may be interchangeably used, some legal language.
Well, something in the you make a definition of sewer that says that sewer may also be known as sanitation,
Something like
wastewater. I think it'll require an amendment to create that definition, but that's one potential avenue to fix this.
We can start with this chapter.
Okay. Trustee Farrell, did you want
So before offering an amendment, I'm just kind of curious from a board standpoint, does anybody have a strong feeling about 6 months being 12 months and 3 months being 6 months?
So I flagged that section as well, and I thought it was too big of a jump to go from 24 to 6 and 12 to 3. In addition to the numbers, though, I also was going to suggest some wording changes, that what we could do is to say, and if you inserted no more than 12 months installments, I don't think you even need the word equal. I think you can have more flexibility that way to say the maximum number of months, and you could say, you know what, I'll give you the next 2 months lower, and then I'm going to need you to catch up or something like that if you need to be more creative. From the commercial standpoint, if someone's struggling over the winter months, 3 months, it could be the difference in getting into your spring warm months to get your cash flowing again. Some sort of shock, at the wrong time of year could really put a business in a hard spot. I think giving them 6 months maybe gives them, usually the tightest months are January, February. Or December, January, February, depending on your business. And so giving them up to 6 months, I don't think is unreasonable and could be really beneficial to a business that might be struggling for some reason. So I'm supportive of going to the 12 and 6, but I would even go a little further and insert the no more than 12, no more than 6, and get rid of the word equal in both.
Do we have a motion for that?
I second what you just said.
I will consider that a motion, and since it's the same exact change, but for 12 and 6, we can do it as one.
Do you want to get rid of
motion.
the equal as part of that as
And
well?
Yes, equal would go away, and it would read to be paid in no more than 12 monthly installments, no more than 6 monthly installments in each section. So if that's my motion, it sounds like Trustee Farrell is willing to second that.
I second.
So any further discussion? All right, I'll call for the vote on the amendment. All right, carries 7-0. Thank you. Other amendments or discussion? Trustee Farrell? Sorry.
I just have, it's just a small one. So in section 13-1-250, number 1, within 10 days of mailing, to be consistent, because up above in section 13-1-210 for appeals under A, we say 10 business days, and I think 10 business days makes more sense than just 10 days of mailing. So I would like to amend 13-1-250, number 1, within 10 business days of mailing.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, I'll call for the vote on the amendment. Okay. Motion carries. Trustee Roberts, did you vote? Okay, thank you. 7-0. So I apologize, I missed a discussion, but I'm going to bring it up on that last section 6. I guess I understand that tying it to a threshold for payment. I just maybe to understand what we wanted the threshold to be. Was it more of a concern of the dollar amount or an account that is just, there's been no payment, maybe they haven't paid for 6 months or something like that, despite efforts to put them on a payment plan, or is it both? What was the goal, I guess, of the notification? I think I kind of can guess, but I
think it's both, but certainly the dollar amount. And the thinking to some degree was not only that it could be updated over time more easily, but that if the administrator has authority to approve things up to that much, that she could approve payment plans up to that much and then kind of be the same. But of course, it's a policy call on what that number is and how it should be reported.
Okay. I'm sorry, Trustee Carlos.
I think some of that came from also, whether it was this board or the previous board, there was a time a fairly large amount came due and half the board was questioning staff pretty hard of why we weren't notified sooner. I think it stems from trying to balance that out. And after that, we did increase the amounts for what the administrator can approve. I think this was I might have even guided the UEB to somehow give a guidance. So the board at some point needs to know about something, but not everything. Do you remember those discussions? I remember Jim Kerr was sitting here, was questioning pretty hard. Some other people, we went back and forth on staff pretty good on where we weren't, where we should we have, shouldn't we have. I think that's where it's coming from.
I totally,
I'm just saying that's just where it's coming from.
Totally get it. I'm just trying to decide if that's the right trigger for the notification, at what point. Because if that threshold does go up, do we really want that threshold to be that high? This is for notification to the board that there is the problem that could be getting out of control. And so,
that cure of deficiency, those are our late notices that go out every single, the Monday before shut off. So we're mandated, and here it's 10 working days, so shut off is tomorrow. We would mail those notices the Monday before. We have to get those notices out to them. So they've got that week to figure out how to get them. It's not so much, I mean, and those just go out monthly. They spit out.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, I mean, we would get noticed anyway if it exceeded so I guess it's kind of a,
If it
not
exceeded
necessarily,
her,
I guess, but.
She would arguably not be able to approve a contract for a payment plan if it was above $10,000.
I was going to say, it's almost, I wonder if it's even, the way it's written, it's kind of a redundant requirement anyway, but I'm going to let it go. But it just struck me as, I'm not sure it does what we wanted it to do, but in terms of getting on top of something quickly. But okay, are there any other amendments? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote on the overall ordinance 1076 as amended.
Quick comment.
Sure.
That is, I sat through several UEB meetings when they went through this fine print of all this stuff in excruciating detail, and I just want to compliment the UEB for sticking with the difficult task. And they really looked at other towns' codes and what made sense and tried to hit balances on several things and everything, and I think they did an excellent job, and I would like to commend the UEB for the amount of effort they put into getting the details right on this one.
Well said. All right, I'll call for the vote. And it carries 7-0. Thank you. Would the clerk please read the items into consent into the record, please?
Consent agenda. Item 1, the first reading of Ordinance 1077, an ordinance of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, amending sections of the Lyons Municipal Code regarding trees. Number 2 is Resolution 2020-30, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, approving a memorandum of understanding with Boulder County Clerk and Recorder for the use of the Boulder County ballot drop box and surveillance camera. Number 3 is Resolution 2020-20, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, approving a master products and professional services agreement for electric meters and an advanced metering infrastructure with Census USA Incorporated. Number 4 is Resolution 2020-31, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, ratifying an amendment to the Highland Ditch Company license agreement for the Eastern Corridor Utility Project. Number 5 is Resolution 2020-33, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, approving a professional services agreement with Meta Urban Design for review and facilitation services for downtown design guidelines. Number 6 is Resolution 2020-35, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, authorizing the 7th Amendment to Disaster Recovery Services Agreement between the Town of Lyons, Colorado and DHM Design Corp. For a term extension for Phase 2 of Bone Park reconstruction. Number 7 is the February 3rd Board of Trustees meeting minutes, and number 8 is the February accounts payable.
All right, would anyone like to pull any items from consent? Trustee Browning.
Look to pull item 5.
Any others?
Can I ask a clarification question first?
Sure.
Ordinance 1077, you said the tree ordinance is first reading, correct?
Right, because it got taken away
Yeah,
for
okay.
revisions, now it's
Okay,
back
so
to
I
action.
will do it the next time. So, never mind.
All right, is there a motion to approve the remaining items on consent?
I move for approval of the consent agenda with item 5 being removed.
Second, go ahead.
Any further discussion? Call for the vote. And those items are approved 7-0. Thank you. All right, general business item, which started out as number 2, which is now number 1, which is the memorandum of understanding with CDOT. Staff report. Welcome back.
Yeah. So we are addressing the MOU first. The MOU had a few additions to it, and there was some clarification on the requirements to fit a roadway to CDOT's design standards, and that CDOT wouldn't pay for the construction of the roadway, which is in itself standard for CDOT. It was just being clear with that message that they weren't going to come out and build that roadway. And there was an additional clarification added that there would be no speed study required to set the speed for that right-of-way. And again, this is, I didn't go over the entire IGA and the MOU because you have seen it before, but I'm willing to go through all of that if you need that clarification at this point in time. But I didn't want to waste a whole lot of time just rehashing what we've done in the past.
So I guess I know you sent a clarification earlier, but my big question was the reference to the non-rural regional highway.
Right. So there was an error in the whereas, and they corrected that as well.
Nobody has probably seen anything you've sent.
And so I just sent it. Yeah, sorry.
I saw an
It was
email, but
between
can't read
when
it
we
up here,
spoke
so
and now.
Can you just?
In that whereas, there was a whereas that. Let me get that and specifically pull that up. Where did I put that? There was. It is. Whereas number.
You know what? Why don't we do this? Can we take a short recess and you print it out so we can have the language in front of us that we're being asked to approve?
The true language? Yeah,
Yes.
sure.
Is there a motion to take a short recess?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, sorry. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Forgot to vote. Thank you. We'll be back if you would get
Thank
us a
you.
copy. That would be great.
You made the change to the extra long.
It's in the actual. Yeah. I did. Oh, okay. Cool.
Well, it's not the COVID kind,
Still, what is it, Robitussin?
but. I'm coming on Greek. I grew up drinking ouzo, so. A little Robitussin is just fine.
No, not in the current, huh?
A Greek cocktail, the Robitussin. Yeah, ouzo, Robitussin. Yeah.
So finally, my first major thing as the UEB was starting with the electric meters. 5 years. 5 years later, we are getting electric meters.
Congratulations.
No, I think I have one.
Actually. Exciting to hear that. That's the
I thought the 25th. No, we're on the 18th. So yeah, I thought you went up to the 26th. Maybe a little more.
I don't know that the operators, they've only go by CDPHE, I just send by CDPHE. Yeah, or there was something from the re-rating people, JVA, who do the re-rating.
No, that's okay.
Oh, two, I should have 2 bottles for you. Congratulations.
That might be a good document to get, is the re-rating.
Right, okay.
He's looking for something kind of explaining
What they
been
thought
done to the
needed.
plant.
Okay.
Not only what they said that we needed, but how the operator addressed it.
We always joke about that.
Okay.
If there's any information, I'd just like to familiarize myself more with the situation and what's actually going on. Thank you.
Yep, just trying to think exactly what would be the most beneficial, right? So the JVA re-rating, probably go through what said should be done and what the plan is to improve it. Actual work at the plant, I don't know that there's anything specific that the operator
That's fine.
have been told to do. But yeah, actually there is some, such as changing polymers, for example. That's what I'll, and that's getting back a little before me, but I can find it.
I noticed this morning there's a previous, there's a new version of the whole package. And I clicked on the microphone. Wherever the. It's going to go on the microphone. Yeah. I'm sure we'll have some sort of.
It's okay, you're
I'm gonna make it, put it that way. Mine's not gonna need help getting to sleep.
I came from Greeley, but I'm only going to So are you going to PDF packet? That's what I do. And of course, I don't see, I just put all the stuff out in piles, you don't see it.
I'm gonna kick that ball.
I need air. I'm like, I wonder it's
Too much hair?
no. I'm on TV looking at the ball.
People can't see what's going
One of
on.
my best moments ever, right?
I can my coat up, stand here and walk.
Would you?
I'm standing like we're talking. Oh, the live long days. What's all those kids doing?
They're awesome.
School's going well?
They're doing great.
Good.
Yeah, it's like, they're great. I'm super excited about it.
And you're almost done in 2 months?
After this, I'm actually gonna miss the first meeting.
Yeah, I got your dilemma. People were asking, outrun, you'll run, talks to them, do things better. What I realize is this, oh yeah, is you get elected here.
Hi, Julie. Hey, how are you? I'm good. How are you? Good, thanks.
Brendan, I have a question for you. Okay. So you know I'm on the PCDC, and I'm also working for the Board of Trustees. Yes. I want to clarify if I'm allowed to talk about the summit at
So, my recommendation is you can talk about your philosophy on housing and affordable housing generally and that kind of thing, but speaking to Summit's proposal in its great detail is probably.
Okay, and is that true after the PCDC has our hearing vote?
Once it, well, for you, potentially. Unlikely, but potentially. Once the PCC has their vote, theoretically, you're no longer on restrictions. But if for some reason there was an appeal of the PCC decision and it had to be delayed to the next board, it doesn't seem like that's likely to be the case, but it could theoretically happen, then it could be a problem. You probably actually use it twice anyways. You can't do it twice. You use that for each other. So you're probably fine.
Did you actually go on that?
So it's scheduled for March 9th, I want to say. They pull up the. You're welcome. If you have any other questions, feel free to, give me a go for it.
Okay, I thought I'd make use of your time while you're doing
Oh, yeah, of course. So we're planning on it being March 9th is the date.
Figuring out why is this so much worse this year
And so this, I was just talking to Paul about this. My other spaces, I would assume that the city's going to be interested in speaking at that public hearing. So it's a tough call for everybody who are interested in both of us. So we're talking about It does, so I might talk about this is the one.
You can always have a special meeting to ask
And I didn't, obviously, because it's down here.
Right.
I've been sound asleep. It's a giant storm outside.
Right, I mean, people cannot talk on something unless raise the risk.
And then the next
Not
one,
yield it.
yeah, when you get touch my phone number. Killed it.
Affordable housing, totally fair game. General philosophy on housing, affordable housing, that's speaking to an pending application. There's nothing restricting you from asking those questions or someone to answer them. They'll just disqualify them potentially from thing and future decision impacting that application.
And I think all the tenants should know this, and I think right, and so I think all the tenants will know that, also the people who know why.
I was already planning on sending
Okay, let's resume where we were now that we have the language. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Sure. So you should have each before you an updated MOU with the modified whereas in number 4. Previously, it had stated at the end and at where it said 2NR-B, a non-rural regional highway. Now it says a non-rural arterial, as in the access code. So it conforms to that access code instead of, there was a little confusion what that meant.
Yeah, so can I just ask a question? I want to make sure I understand, and I appreciate that change, because I think what it does now is it actually uses terminology that's in the Pell versus terminology before the Pell, correct? So when we talk about non-rural arterial, it would be the one just above Main Street in the Pell. Is that what I understand to be the change?
Well, sure. Tim Billibrand, CDOT Region 4 Permits Manager. The Pell terminology, since it's tied with the access control plan, they go hand in hand.
Okay, because before we made that change, it seemed to refer to the existing conditions that would not be in existence if we passed and adopted the IGA, or, correct? I mean, that's what, it looked like it was referring to conditions prior to the Pell. So are we in fact using the right terminology, I guess is my question, that's consistent with the Pell plan?
It's currently a regional highway, correct?
Right. It's currently a regional highway, so we're changing it out of that classification. And that NRB access, keep in mind that the access category is different than the engineering category of the roadway. So the NRB access category, that's what we want. That's what dictates for the Lions Village East development. Number of accesses, spacing of accesses, auxiliary lane lengths. That's what we're going for.
Okay, so that's where I think I might be getting a little bit confused, is between when I looked at the Pell and it looked at the different categories. It really just says arterial. It doesn't say non-rural. It just says arterial.
So that'd be maybe your first question is a no then. So the Pell is still separate from the access control plan. The Pell classifications, those are engineering functional classifications, which are different than the access code classifications.
So how should we describe it in the MOU? Which one?
Well, right now that NRB, non-rural arterial, that's only an access code classification. Correct. So that is the exact name of the section that we're going into.
Could we insert, could we insert some language, though, that ties it to the language in the Pell as well, in a whereas? So, because I think what is easier for everyone here to understand is the Pell classification, and would the arterial classification be consistent with the access plan classification as well? Do you know what I'm
Maybe in
getting at?
parentheses say as defined as X in the Pell,
Sure, we could list both classifications.
And that way it's just crystal clear.
The engineering classification and the access code classification.
Let me throw an idea out there, too.
Sure.
Brian Varela, CDOT Region 4 resident engineer. I think if we wanted to do that, we certainly could. It's an option. Another option would be to leave it as is, because the majority of what you're trying to achieve with the memorandum of understanding is a change to access, and a change to the speed limit, which is what we're specifically working towards in this document. Since a lot of that information is dictated in the intergovernmental agreement associated with the access control plan, I think it's easier to tie the IGA to the ACP to, there's a lot of acronyms, forgive me, and it's late. But if we tie the ACP and the IGA and the MOU together, then it may be a much more easy to follow document, but again, we can cut this either way, whatever the board prefers. And I apologize for all the acronyms.
That's okay. And this is not late, trust me. This is nothing. No, I guess where I guess I'm coming from is the Pell is the more accessible document, in my opinion, for developers to review, to board members to read. I get what you're saying with the access control plan. That's probably more meaningful to you all from a technical standpoint. But I think if I'm a developer or someone trying to understand what this does for me, or as we go forward and there are people who come into this that don't have this background, the Pell will probably be the more informative document. And I don't think it's necessarily completely clear all the time how the two, to the average reader, how they're linked. And so it could just be another whereas or something that says, to be consistent with the classification of arterial within the Pell, or I don't know. I don't have the words that I'm looking for, but do you understand what I'm kind of getting at?
The parentheses concept where it's like as defined as arterial in the Pell after that, that'd be, now you're not adding a whole new whereas.
as defined in ACP as this and in the Pell as this.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm open to the best way to word that, but I think some reference to say, our intention here is to get to that type of classification of roadway.
Sure, just let me
Okay.
just make clear, though, that the eventual IGA to be signed, that's only binding on the access control plan. The access control plan's the binding legal document. The Pell is a study, which is very informative, but it's not a binding legal document.
True, and I get that. I think it's still, these are whereases. I mean, coming back to the fact that whereases really at the end of the day don't probably mean a whole lot, but I think
They show intent.
it does show intent, and I think that when I read the Pell and I look at those classifications, it's just a little bit easier, I think, to understand, okay, this is the type of roadway and the speeds that we're shooting for in this area. But you'd be open to adding some kind of reference there. You don't object to that. Okay. And then in NRB, so that's again tied to the access control plan category.
Yep.
Okay. So that's why I was just looking for that designation, and that's why I couldn't find it in the Pell. Okay. Any other comments, questions from the board? Trustee Browning?
I have a question as to timing. If we're going to seek these changes in access and so forth, the steps are required. And as you point out in your memo, it's going to, when we do that, it's going to require some significant expense on the town's part that we don't have budgeted yet. So are there any, who controls the timing of when that needs to be done? If we decide, for example, that we can budget for this 2 years from now and that's when we want to pursue it, is it up to us to decide that? Or the other factor, of course, is we're not in control of when the developers may choose to go forward with their plans. So things can change out there. So
They would traditionally pay for this.
okay. So it's not, we're not under any, put it this way, we're not under any deadline to start this process until we can get an idea of what may happen out there.
There was a deadline. There is not in the current MOU.
Okay. So there's not a deadline, okay.
Anything else from the board? Trustee Carvis?
Going to the designation of the NRB, the non-rural arterial, my colleagues probably laugh at me that I actually don't do very much technology digging into things, but in the CDOT's information, it's in some of the information you provided us, that there's a definition that that's a non-significant road. It's in some of the documents that CDOT has that as a definition of NRB. Are these just designations and those comments, things like that in there aren't all that guiding? Because, and the reason I bring that up is tens of thousands of cars shooting through here. We just have our hotel study that says 43% increase of cars going through. It sounds kind of a significant road for CDOT to get traffic to Rocky Mountain National Park. So is that just?
No, I think it's a very significant roadway. In the access code, there's not really a difference between significance from a regional perspective, like you're talking about with engineering. I mean, the NRB category, that's what you have in Main Street downtown already.
Yeah.
Right? So all we're doing is we're just extending it further to the east, past where the Lions Village East development is.
Okay.
So it's already a significant roadway.
So, thank you. That's what I was.
May I add to that as well?
Yeah.
I know that's something that our region transportation director pointed out, is the use that's being requested is consistent with what's already in the community.
Okay.
Which is part of the reason it's easy for us to support the idea.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Is there a motion for the resolution? Sorry, I don't have the number here. 2020-29. Trustee Browning?
Yes, we need to vote. So I move for approval of Resolution 2020-29, relating to an MOU between the Colorado Department of Transportation and the Town of Lyons.
I'll second that.
With the changes as reflected.
Yeah, I was actually going to go ahead and do it formally as an
Okay.
amendment so that it's documented. So I would just like to propose an amendment to the fourth whereas, where language would be added to make an appropriate reference to the Pell road classification of arterial. And I'll leave to the attorney the best way to do that. Thank you. You're welcome. Is there a second? Any further discussion? And that's agreeable to you all. CDOT?
We do still need to wash it through the Attorney General's office and our legal counsel as well.
Okay. It's a whereas, right? Okay. All right, I'll call for the vote on that amendment. Carries 7-0. Any other amendments or discussion? All right, hearing none, I'll call for the vote on the overall resolution as amended. All right, and the call for the vote is 7-0. Thank you. All right. Next up then would be, did I get those in the right order? I think, did I? Okay. Now it's the IGA with CDOT regarding the access control plan. I think at this point we're pretty familiar with the IGA, so I don't know that we need a report unless you have anything to add to what we've done in the past. Just to clarify, so this is with the single voting one, we didn't divide the voting blocks. Okay. Any comments or questions, concerns from the board? Is there a motion? Whoever.
I move the adoption of Resolution 20-28, a resolution of the town approving an IGA among the town and a lot of people.
I'll second.
A lot of cities.
Any further discussion? I guess I just want to offer our thanks for your patience in working through this with us and accommodating our concerns and making sure that we do have a path forward to future development on the Eastern Corridor. It's very much appreciated, especially your time and the several meetings that you've attended.
That's what we're here for.
And if there's nothing more, we'll call for the vote. All right, it carries 7-0, so thank you. We have a unanimous approval. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We have one more item on the agenda. You know, I have two on my printed copy, but there's not, one is not on the website. So what happened to the resolution 2020-34, sewer line replacement that got pulled?
And that wasn't uploaded, Tracy didn't have anything, and I don't know why.
It's just printing on the agenda. Okay, so that item is not really on the agenda. Okay. So the next item is discussion direction on a pretreatment ordinance. We'll let staff get started. Good, whenever.
I don't have a report. This was direction from you guys to,
Oh, I thought you had something you wanted to present. Okay.
From the board to put on the agenda.
All right, who would like to start? Go ahead, Trustee Brown?
Yeah, this relates to the timing of when the board may wish to consider a pretreatment ordinance. UEB, at its last meeting, and I guess this next meeting is Wednesday, is working on one. And really the question is whether this board, between now and I guess April 6th is our last regular scheduled meeting, is that something that we want to take up? And if so, we need to give direction to the UEB with respect to how they would, when they would be able to get something to us so that it can be noticed in time to and go through a first and second reading, and or is this something that this board doesn't think they can do in that period of time and wants to leave it for the next board? So I mean, that's really the reason that's here. Is just kind of, is this something we want to take up before mid-April or not?
Throw it on there. I'm ready. Let's get this done.
I would just request we have time to do a workshop before first reading. So that's,
I guess the question is somewhat for staff
I think the
and
UEB
whether the staff feels they could be ready in time for it to go through the process with this board.
could have for the March 16th, not the March 2nd, because that gives us 2 meetings. You do workshop and first reading.
We can't do, I would
don't
not
wanna
do
do
them
that.
on the same day, just because the last time we did that, the changes couldn't get,
So that's been the standard for a while, so that's what I just assumed.
we decided because we can't make any changes between first and second reading, that's not productive. And we've had too many ordinances be pushed
You
back.
guys are going to change it the month before you.
The second, first reading the 16th, and second reading the 6th.
well, we're just trying to avoid what just happened with the tree ordinance, which is, we didn't see it in time to give suggestions and feedback.
I totally agree with that. I was all.
Yeah, no, I hear you, but some ordinances you can get away with it, but some you can't.
Well, actually, I think if you're going to workshop it the second, it's not going, that's even better, because then the UEB will take back what you comment on at the workshop on the second and have it ready for first reading on the 16th. So I think that, because we can have everything basically ready to go, and then you guys can have your comments so that we can make changes and get it more formalized for the following meeting, which is what you want.
April 6th.
Yes, and then if it gets carried over for whatever reason, you still can take action on the 20th.
Yeah. I think it's doable, let's push it.
Good. Trustee Browning?
Yeah, it makes sense to me for this board to take it up, because I think during the course of our almost 2 years, I think we've had probably 3 workshops on various aspects of this issue, and so I think this board has a pretty good, and of course, we just got through doing the testing board ordinance, so I think this board has a lot of background knowledge that it makes sense to go forward while we're still in office.
We did tentatively put this in as the workshop on the 2nd when we did our planning today, so as long as staff feels like they can be ready to present that, I think we can shoot for that schedule then. Okay? All right, thank you. Item removed from consent, number 5, Trustee Browning. Everybody okay?
Should stay for the.
It was sitting right here.
Taking the shoes.
You're stealing my bottle.
Exciting.
Did it come up?
I was going to say, as long as you share, we don't care what it is.
Yeah, Spicoli, did you bring enough for everybody?
Trustee Browning, did you want to start things off since you pulled this?
Yeah, I don't know if we do a staff thing first, or you want me to explain why I
Usually you
pulled
give the
explain
reason why you
it.
pulled it, and then
Yeah,
we
I
go
pulled
from
this
there.
because this has a long history. And the reason I pulled it is I think that the progression of this was back before the flood, a long draft of downtown the design guidelines was done, I think, by the outside contract town planner Bob Joseph at the time. Then the flood happened, it got put on the back burner. Then it got taken off the back burner at the PCDC level sometime late 2017, early 2018, and it's been, I believe, worked on since then. And now we, at the end of what's really at this point almost a 7-year process with a long break in the middle, it's proposed that at this point we hire an outside consultant for up to $10,000 to, I guess, finalize this process. And it seemed like to me that if that's what happens and it finally gets done, the process will have been an outside town planner under contract does a comprehensive first draft, then we decide to go bring in-house our town planning services, and the in-house town planner that we hired to save money from not contracting it out anymore works with the PCDC for a long period of time, it doesn't get done. Now we hire a second outside contractor to finish something, and it just seemed like extremely inefficient use of town resources. And I have problems with things like the Fourth Avenue Bridge pending, and us potentially looking for ways to fund as much of that as we can at this point in this long process, spending $10,000 for an outside consultant. I have issues about that. And I think the PCDC wants to comment, and maybe Trustee Drysdale as the liaison, so.
Go ahead. Mayor Protem.
Yes, I'd like to comment, but I'd also like to ask Paul and Holly also to comment. I was probably not enthusiastic about this myself until I saw the presentation from the woman who's actually doing this, and her proposal, as I understand it, and I would like the members of the PCDC to clarify, was not so much to redo the downtown design guidelines, but to carry it over the last mile. And I agree, as Trustee Browning indicated, it's been a long time. It's been a long time, people in Lyons residents working on this, and a lot of good thinking. There's a lot of good thinking in the draft downtown guidelines that we have now. But it doesn't seem to have reached the point where there was high confidence in bringing it forward either to the Board of Trustees or to the businesses, or in a format that prospective businesses that would be using them in development would view them not only not as a deterrent, but something they clearly understood in order to be able to move forward. The presenter, at least in my opinion, clarified that her work in several towns and cities and neighborhoods did exactly that. It helped for those towns and neighborhoods to facilitate and activate some developments because of the clear, often using graphics, means to communicate it. We haven't had much real development in downtown, and I think having something enforceable as downtown design guidelines and able to be clearly and effectively communicated would be beneficial to the town. And I think even if it facilitates one project in the downtown area, and I'm guessing, which would probably be in the $750,000 range or more, it's probably what it would take to develop anything downtown, would pay for this, a little more than pay for this in the use tax associated with the materials necessary to execute that development. So I support it. I support the expenditure. It's not a lot of money. It is money, and I think money that we should be paying attention to. I don't disagree with that at all. But I would like to give the planner and the PCD representative an opportunity to express their thoughts.
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
You want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
So I appreciate that this has been a long process, a long bifurcated
Could you guys, I'm
process.
sorry, just to introduce yourself so
I'm
the
sorry.
audience knows
I'm
who's
Holly
speaking.
Rogan.
Thank you.
I'm Holly
Okay.
Rogan on the PCDC. I appreciate that it's been a long process. And the way I look at it, the meta urban design has really specialized skills and experience that we on the PCDC don't have, and I don't think the planning department here has. And that experience will help us, I think, avoid mistakes that could wind up being costly and could wind up with us getting a built environment that we don't necessarily want, or cause so much back and forth between architects and developers and PCDC that companies might decide it's not worth trying to develop here.
So really good design guidelines that are usable can save the developer money. They'll be more likely to develop, and it'll get us the built environment that we desire. And especially, if we're talking about a downtown hotel, if a chain, for example, wanted to come in and build a hotel downtown, we want to have really airtight design guidelines for them, or else we could wind up with something we really don't want. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I just want to say I support moving forward with this. I think there's lots of reasons why things don't always go in the perfect linear order you think they will when you take on a project. And as a business owner downtown, I have a very vested interest, obviously, but I feel like objectively one of the concerns that we have is preserving the historic nature and theme that we have downtown, because it is really unique. And right now there is absolutely nothing that would prevent someone from coming in and doing pretty much anything they want, with very little to slow them down in terms of whatever they might be interested in building down there. So I think it's important to have these, and they have been a long time in the making. And I was incredibly impressed with this presentation as well. And so I got kind of excited about seeing this get over the finish line and hopefully have something firm that we can hand a developer. Because I can tell you, as someone who has done some renovations years ago, you're looking for guidance. You want to know, what does the town want? And what direction do you want to go? And I don't think, it's not that helpful when you're trying to do those things, even when you want to be a good steward of the, preserving what character we have down there. You don't really always know you don't always know what you're doing, whether it is going to meet the goals or not. I mean, we're not designers, so it's kind of scary ordering awnings and colors and things. You're like, what does the town want to see here? And so I think this is a reasonable amount of money for the end product that we would get. So will support it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'll add that I do think this is an extremely reasonable price, having seen other proposals of this nature. I think we can commend the work that's been done so far as a contributor to that. So I think it's a good deal.
Any other comments, Trustee Browning?
One more quick final comment. I don't question the need for design guidelines. We'll see when they get to the board from whatever source creates them. May have some comments there. I think our design guidelines for the Eastern Corridor, that were also the result of a very long process, probably did and still do more harm than good. So I think we have to look at these things carefully. I just question whether a town of 2,000 people with 3 blocks of downtown needs to hire outside consultants to determine what it wants to do with those 3 blocks. Yeah, preserving historic character, that's mentioned probably a dozen times in the initial draft. I mean, it's not, I think we're perfectly capable of declaring the things we like and don't like downtown. I don't think we need to go to the detail that big cities do. But I really think this is an example, particularly when we've made the decision to go to in-house staff to save outside consulting fees in the planning community development area. This is going back the other way, back to where we were when these things got started. And the overall scope of this bothers me, that we paid an outside contractor to do the first draft. Then we brought in in-house people to do it, and now we're going to pay in another outside contractor to finish it. And I just can't convince myself that that's a good use of the taxpayers' money. So I'm opposed to it.
Okay.
A few things, a few comments. First, we have a number of, we had one developer in today that was looking at potentially relocating historic structures. This could provide some, what do you call it? As we said, protection for those. I have produced design guidelines. Right now, I don't have the capacity to do it with the in-house staff. Having an independent verification is always helpful. In the planning world, you typically bring in people to do that fine tuning, not to necessarily do the bulk of the work. That's what you're supposed to do as a town, and I think we have done the bulk of the work. It's just that refining and getting to an easily digestible document. I think our commercial and mixed-use design guidelines are a bit clunky, and if they were taking that last mile, they would be a little bit easier to utilize, and we would be getting probably a little bit more, even when we applied them to the last development, it was a clunky process because we couldn't see or visualize what those outcomes were, and we were slowly getting warmer towards those, and having a graphic example of those would really help everybody understand where that was going. We have some Google Earth snapshots in those on our code online, and that it's not very clear what they're referring to. Somebody that can make an image about what that image is supposed to represent, as opposed to take a snapshot and there's greenery there or other things that distract you from what that intent of that image is a really high-tuned skill. And it takes some time and a lot of experience to do exactly that, to show what that image is meant to do. And developers that come in, and if they can look at an image and get that quick feedback, they're able to say, this is what the town wants very quickly, and not have that kind of getting warmer in essence. And so that's what I think Meta Urban Designs brings to the table. And for $8,000, I think it's a really good deal.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
It occurred to me that we were having discussion without a motion on the table.
I was going to say, can we, I was just going to call.
I move for passage of resolution 2020-33.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any final discussion? Sure. Trustee Farrell?
How far away is this draft to being final? How close, if we pass this right now, when would we expect to have a complete and final draft? Or no draft, but complete and final?
We had a timeline. I would like to talk to Samantha, the owner, but it's about a month or a month and a half. I just want to know what her workload is right now.
Okay.
So
it's basically taking what's here as a draft and finalizing it.
Well, it's that as well as facilitating outreach to developers, businesses, and the public. So holding those meetings and getting the feedback, calling that feedback and bringing it in for presentation.
So the current developers that are in the process now of thinking of things that they wanting to do.
That as well as other developers that are in town that have developed.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I'll go ahead and call for the vote on the motion for resolution 2020-33. All right, the motion does pass 6-1. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Okay, we don't have anything on the agenda for future agenda items, so we're up to trustee reports. Any volunteers? Trustee Browning, you want to start?
The SFC met last Thursday. I was there, and I didn't bring my notes, but I don't think I did. Let me see something. Let's see. They have formed a subcommittee to start working on the annual town cleanup day. And I believe there were some, it's normally done in May. There were a couple of conflicts on the days they normally would have done it. They talked about doing it on May the 2nd, and everybody said that was too early for snow risk. And so I believe it's now, let me get my calendar. I was going to give everybody the date because it's later than usual because of conflicts and where Memorial Day fell and a lot of things. I think that it is June.
It's in my report.
Oh, okay. June 20th. It's what they decided on there now.
Summer cleanup day.
Yeah, no risk of snow there, hopefully.
Yeah.
There is always a risk.
So that's their big project coming up in upcoming months.
Okay. Trustee Miller?
Okay, let's see. Looking for my notes here. The Boulder County housing voucher application was last week for Section 8 for the wait list. And that was February 11th and 12th. They had sign up at Leaf. You could go and put your name on the wait list there. So that was something that they do. They try and open it, I think it's 3 times a year, but it hasn't been opened in a couple of years now. So it's good that they got that list open again. We had a woman come from Roots, it's called. I think it's Roots. I'm trying to find her name for sure. But she is doing a, she's doing a survey. It's a county, it's a statewide funding basically that through Boulder County to a survey to get people's basically what their needs are. It's a needs assessment tool to figure out where funding needs to go to funnel into. They have lots of money to give, and they want to be able to spread it out where it's needed the most, especially in rural communities such as ours. And it's a very, I took the assessment the other day, and it's very detailed. It took me about 20 minutes to take. They want to know details about your living situation, what your community is lacking, what you specifically need, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to put that link on the town website. I will forward it to you so everybody can take that. Let's see. Boulder County Area on Aging is in the process of seeking another grant for the Community Share Program, which is for getting veggies to seniors during the summer from Stonebridge Farms. Stonebridge has been donating about 10 shares of veggies to the seniors throughout the summer, so that's being worked on. That's really about all the 2020 census is coming up, and
Goodwill grants are due.
March, what'd you say?
Goodwill grants.
Oh yeah, Goodwill grants. They, March 1st, Goodwill grants are, March 2nd. Is it March 1st or March 2nd?
It says the first bit.
Yeah, 2nd, are due. So anybody that has a nonprofit organization, that has a human services, mission, can apply for a grant from the town. So I don't think we have any applications yet, maybe one. So we need to get people motivated on that. Did you put out, we need to put it on another flyer on that. So yeah, that's all I've got.
Ecology Board met tonight, and I decided to bless you all with my presence instead of going there. Aren't you guys so lucky? So I don't know what they discussed. Can't help you with that. UEB meets tomorrow. Guess what they'll be discussing? Retreatment, I'm sure. So you already knew that already. Guys, you guys just keep stealing my thunder left and right. I can't believe this. What's that?
They should be discussing the summit referral tonight.
Okay.
You can't
And
discuss anyway, so it's good you're here.
there you go. There you go. So that's it. UEB will be meeting tomorrow evening, right?
Yep.
Yes, tomorrow evening, 4:30 to 6. And that's it. That's all I got.
All right. Trustee Roberts.
The Economic Vitality Commission will meet here at 8:30 tomorrow morning. That's all.
All right. Trustee Farrell.
I think Victoria did a lovely job of kind of summarizing what's going on in the Arts and Humanities Commission in the admin report. But so something I wanted to though show you specifically is that the walking art tour collection for Lions is up and running. So you can download, it's called the Clio app, if you want to, onto your phone. And I'm going to just try, it's super hard, but it looks kind of like that. And you can touch each of the little different places that are around town. And it gives you the address and the information about it. But I'll also send you out a link. But here's an example of what it looks like online with a little map and the little dots and then the descriptions over here that you can touch on. And so I was actually going to see about having the commission put together a little something that could maybe go into one of the newsletters and be blasted out so that people within the community can start.
Isn't that going live in April? I had it was going live April 6th or something like that. That's
It
what I
is
think.
live right now.
Oh,
That,
okay.
I think what you might be referring to is the Bell of Renewal.
That's like April 19th.
So,
But it's okay, I'll check on it.
okay, so anyway, it would just, because, but I mean, I can look at this right now and see Sally King's Bears over by the Stone Cup, and like you can even view it, you know, like they've got this little map so that you can see the street view.
Are they doing areas where there's public art as well?
It's all of the public art.
Not just statues, but also like here, town hall?
The town hall I'm not positive about, but I believe the library's on here. So, yeah.
Okay.
That's all for me. Oh, I didn't put my.
That's okay. I heard you.
Okay, so the, one of the other items that the PCDC is working on is the Apple Valley buyout properties. And the question of does Lions want to acquire those buyout properties? I won't go too deep into it because it would take hours. Well, one of the requests was for me to go to the Chamber of Commerce and ask if the Chamber of Commerce believed that active usage of those buyout properties in the Apple Valley area, if we acquired them from Boulder County, if we had things like fly fishing and camping and so on and so forth, if that would help businesses in town due to the increased traffic. And basically, the feedback of the board of the Lions Chamber of Commerce was that they do not support active usage on Apple Valley, in the Apple Valley Road area because it is unlikely to add enough additional economic benefit to justify selling out our neighbors. They did have a little bit of a question about if there was any difference between Boulder County closing, having them and closing off access, or the town of Lyons having them and closing off access, as long as access was closed off. That's all.
Can I have one more thing, please?
Sure.
Are you done, Bernie?
Yeah.
I was gonna add one more thing. I forgot the Lions volunteers. I think the final numbers are in for the scrap metal and block styrofoam pickup. I think it's in the email to the town, so thank the town staff for putting that in there. Barney Dreistedt, Mayor Pro Tem Dreistedt, and Rick DeSilva from the SFC do a lot of organizing of this. And 11 pickups of scrap metal and block styrofoam, netting, 6,100 pounds of scrap metal, 106 hours plus of volunteer time. So that was just 2019 alone. It's block styrofoam, I think, was only part of the year, if I recall correctly. So kudos to Mr. Dreistedt and Rick DeSilvo for really heading that up for the Lions volunteers and helping Lions out with that.
That's great.
Thank you.
Sure. Just from a meeting standpoint, Parks and Rec met earlier in the month. I wasn't able to attend, but I did touch base with Ian. They talked a bit about the 4th Avenue Bridge and just trying to support that however they can. Dr. Cog is tomorrow, and the students will meet on Sunday to discuss the latest on vaping. The only other item I had is that I did ask the town attorneys, both the URA attorney and Brandon, our town attorney here, kind of helped with Trustee Browning. You offered your resignation from the LURA. So they did look into that, and you can help me with this, but my summary, I guess, is that there's no legal precedent to give direction here about how to move forward with a resignation from a body that the board sits on. But we did find some relevant language in our code of ethics that probably speaks to it. So what we thought we'd do is send that language around to everybody. We can highlight the sections on it. There's some sections on attendance where it basically says that you're obligated as a board member to attend all the meetings where we're appointed or assigned or whatever. I feel like from a process standpoint, the right thing to do is to have the LURA board decide whether they want to accept the resignation or not at our next meeting of the LURA. So that'll be on the agenda for the LURA for them to decide, and we'll give them the same information and make a determine there. The issue is that if the resignation stands, it ties up a seat that can't be filled per our bylaws. So I think if they want to accept the resignation, then we will, we have some options to look at whether we want to change the bylaws to allow the seat to be filled, and discuss also what implications that could have from a precedent standpoint that someone just chooses not to continue to serve in all the capacities that are required of board members. So there's more to come on that. And Trustee Browning, if you'd like to say anything, happy to. Go ahead. I think you just had yours on.
Okay. Yeah, since that's been brought up again, let me comment that before I resigned, I looked at several sources of what would happen. I found examples of other public entity representatives resigning from LURA boards when they perceived there to be conflicts of interest, so it was not something that was unprecedented. I looked at the LURA bylaws, and unlike pretty much every other organization I've been a member of, the bylaws simply didn't address how to replace resigning members. It's a defect in the LURA bylaws, and given how much money LURA has paid its high-priced attorneys to leave out a standard bylaw provision is a shortcoming that the LURA attorneys and the LURA board need to address. They need to amend their bylaws to deal with resignations. It's not something I did lightly. There was precedent for it. Other public officials have reached the same conclusion that I did personally. I'm not suggesting anybody else should reach that conclusion. But I think to suggest there's anything unethical about it is something, frankly, I take great offense at, and I don't appreciate it.
Happy to send our code of ethics around, and everyone can just do a plain reading of the language. So we'll address it at the LURA meeting next week. That's all I had. Anything else? Do you want to move on to the summary of action items?
Staff will be sending a copy of the Code of Ethics to the Board of Trustees.
And the LURA, please.
Oh, and
It'll
LURA.
come out with the LURA packet.
Yep. Oh, and LURA packet. Okay. I'm going to follow up on the Clio app, the Goodwill grants, and the either, is it the roof presentation or the community share program you want linked?
It's,
All of them?
I'm trying to find it.
Okay. But
But
we want to do some linking there to
something,
some community services. And other than that, from, let's see, no, that's from executive session. That's all. Anybody else have anything? And then changes, of course, to all the resolutions and ordinances.
I was going to do a memo on the Summit housing deadlines.
Okay. All right. If there's nothing else, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session number 1. There you go. Sorry. I need a snack.
I move to go into executive session pursuant to CRS Section 246402-4E and 246402-4B for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators and for legal advice from the attorneys representing the town regarding the transfer and potential conditions on the transfer of the town's cable franchise with Lions Communications LLC to USA Communications.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? I'll call for the vote. Miss Trustee Roberts, okay. Sorry, I get one, lose one. Thank you, 7-0. We'll give them a minute to clear chambers.
Brandon, the encoder's off?
Pardon?
That's off?
Not yet. When they do they always do the votes.
Yeah. Oh. Sure, that's off.